taking a break from the Gospel of John. Those of you that have been with us, we've been on a journey through John, and it's been incredible for me personally, and I hope it's been a blessing to you as well. But we're taking a break, and something is stirring in my heart, something is in my soul that I have to talk about. I feel compelled to share. So this week it's radically personal. Next week it's going to be radically biblical. And then there's going to be a radically practical message as well. What do we do? What do we do when our joy dies? You show up and you sing songs about something that is a memory to you. For some of you, it is a distant memory. Do you remember the last time you felt really alive? The daily routines of life, where a week turns into a month, that turns into a year, that turns into a decade, and we get so caught up in everything else, and it sucks the life from our souls. We try so hard. And yet at the end of the day, what have we accomplished? And it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. You're trying your best. And you're doing your best to work hard and make a difference and provide for your family. And yet at the end of the day, the ends still don't meet. And so you put in more hours and you ask for overtime. And yet, and that leads to this frustration. And many of us live in a constant state of frustration, simmering below the surface of our lives. Disillusionment. Because we were told, many of us at some point in our past, that God has a good plan for your life, that God's going to do awesome things through you. And what happens when those words shatter upon the rocks of our reality? And we are in the deep end, trying to keep one nostril above the waterline. Disillusionment, cynicism, bitterness, anger. I'm going to share some things very personal today, and this will make most of you uncomfortable. But what I ask you to do is to embrace the discomfort. May it be a holy discomfort. It's a risky thing for a pastor to be transparent because you risk losing credibility. Because many of us were taught to believe that pastors wear capes and that we are better than the rest of you. And in some way that gives you hope that at least somebody out there is experiencing what you sing about. It may not be you, but at least the pastor, at least the ministers, at least they're experiencing the reality that I read about in the Bible. And so I know it's risky. I know that some of you might say, I want to go to a place where we have role models that aren't weak, where we have leaders that can inspire us and rally the troops. And that's okay. We're not here. Our mission isn't to keep people here. Our mission is to empower you to do what God is leading you to do. But I hope that you'll hear my heart. Many of you have known me for a number of years. And hopefully through the ups and downs, through the thick and thin, you've seen my heart. I really do want to serve Jesus. And it's tragically disappointing when I find myself in a place where I can't do that. And the guilt and the shame and the condemnation that comes with being a pastor that has lost his joy. When you have no hope. When you begin to think that actually my family and the world would be better without me in it. The darkness that I've become very familiar with. And so today I'm going to let down the drawbridge and give y'all a guided tour of what's been happening in my heart, what's been happening behind the scenes and where I'm at right now. And the point is not to make you feel sorry for me or to make you feel bad in any way. Preachers are master pretenders. You ever see a preacher implode and everybody's shocked? My God, I didn't see it coming. All this crazy stuff was happening behind the scenes and nobody saw it. You know why? It's not because you didn't look. It's because we are so good at pretending. Because that's what we get paid to do. And we're terrified that if we take off our mask, you'll see who we really are and you will not love us anymore. So I promise you this, even if you feel led to go to a different church and you're listening to a different preacher, I guarantee you they have felt like what I'm about to describe. Now, I've listened to thousands of sermons over the years. That's my hobby, is listening to other people preach, trying to sharpen my own gifting. And I've never really heard another preacher share what I am about to share because it's dangerous. I'm not here to make you feel bad or guilty. It's my greatest hope that you will receive an infusion of hope today. That what I preach, I actually believe. And I believe it not because it's my career. I believed it in my heart way before it became anything professional or paid. I believe it not because I'm in a position, but because I truly met Jesus. And I've never gotten over it. It's my greatest prayer today that hope and joy can be resurrected in your life. And I'd like to preface all of this by saying that none of what I'm about to describe is your fault. Because you walk away thinking, man, I should have seen this. We should have done more. No, no, no. You know, I tried really hard for you not to see. And of course, my family, my wife, my kids, they saw behind the scenes what was happening and the unraveling. On the contrary, y'all did everything humanly possible to help me. I mean, I went from a leadership team that secretly conspired to destroy me and hurt my family to a leadership team now that secretly conspired to help me and bless my family. No joke. Like they're meeting behind the scenes saying, how can we help him? We're going to buy him a house. That's actually what happened. And so I cannot say enough about the love and support that I've received from you, that my family has received from you. So many times I've wanted to quit because I knew in my heart that y'all deserved so much more than who I was and what I was capable of giving. I felt guilty for not being better than I was because I think of you and the sincere love I have for you in my heart, and I want what's best for you, and I knew that I was not what was best for you. There were some Sundays where it took everything I had just to show up. And so I now have a new and profound empathy for people that just can't make it here. You will never hear guilt from me. Not anymore. Those of you that are tuned in online right now, I want you to know that I love you. And there will never be any, I hope you eventually make it here in person because it's better here than where you're at. And there's this underlying judgment. If you were a better Christian, you'd show up. No. There are some people that have just enough energy to get out of bed and walk down and sit on the couch. And they are in such a desperately dark place. The last thing they need is judgment and condemnation. I really want you to hear this. One of the main reasons I'm still here and standing before you today is because y'all did not give up on me when I had given up on myself. I don't know why you're still here. I know, my family knows who I became. A shell of my former self. I was embarrassed by who I was. I knew the effect I had on others, and it killed me. I wasn't radiant with joy. I wasn't shining bright with hope. I was the opposite. I didn't know what to do about it. And so I look at you and say, why did you stay? I mean, there are other churches and other ministries that are better than us. There are definitely other pastors that are better than me, especially over the last 3 years. And yet you keep showing up. And by God's grace, whatever happens in the future as we move forward, you will get the credit for, not me. I was used up, felt like I had nothing more to offer. And for that, I'll be forever grateful. I pledge to you to give you everything I have for as long as I have left. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'd also like to thank my family for giving me grace when I was hard to live with, especially Amy. Now, Sadie and Jack are here, and they saw it too, but she saw it more than anyone else when I literally crumbled. And I was weeping on the floor, and I'm not a person that cries. You can ask my family. They've rarely seen me cry. But I remember that day in the bedroom where I just collapsed, and I could not get up. And she held me as I wept. I became someone I never thought I'd be. A bitter and angry person. And this had an incredibly negative impact on my family. And Amy was there holding it together behind the scenes for years. She did everything in her power to keep our family together because I was fracturing it. And so with all of my heart, I apologize for bringing darkness and misery into our home. And I can carry the weight for a little while now. But she's been carrying it for years. And I think by God's grace, I'm in a place where I can carry it for a while. The spiral into despair started on October 17th of 2019. It'll be 4 years next month. That's when I was fired from a church that we had moved here from Texas to pastor with high hopes and big dreams. It was a very difficult assignment, but there was so much good happening that I was ready to endure and persevere, primarily because the Lord would not release us. And it was killing me. You can ask my wife. I started having chest pains. The first time, I never had those before. It was in 2017. I was walking out of church through Linden Christian, and do you remember that? When I stopped because I thought I was dying. I never experienced that before. By God's grace, I've always been very healthy physically and mentally. And so it absolutely blindsided me where felt like my heart was going to explode. But there was so much fruit we were seeing with lives being changed and souls being saved. And I tried to focus on that. To say, look, they're worth it. You're worth it. The price that was, the toll that it was taking. And then on Sunday mornings, I would breathe the air of heaven. Do you remember when you were there, some of you? And I just felt possessed by the Holy Spirit in a way that I'd never felt in my life. And every Sunday I was reminded of my calling to this place. I felt like my shoes were 3 inches off the stage. And so we stayed. The tension that had been building for a while after several emergency leadership meetings, it was a very, very difficult time. I met with the deacons and elders on October the 7th, and we agreed to weather the storm and stand side by side at the upcoming annual meeting. and present a unified front to our church. And we were going over the questions that we might receive and how we could respond together and weather this storm. After that meeting, I went around and shook all of their hands, and I really believed that we were actually going to do what we had decided to do. I found out later that they had secretly met on October the 11th and voted to terminate me. I remember the hours before my world fell apart, our world fell apart. On Thursday, October 17th, I had spent the morning sermon planning with one of the pastors on our team, and then I had lunch with the principal of Linden Christian, who's a good friend. We were walking back into the building when I received the email that hit me like a torpedo. It came from the chairman of the deacon board and simply read, "Your presence is required at People's First HR at 3 o'clock. And it stopped me in my tracks, literally. I couldn't get my mind around, I didn't believe it, because I couldn't get my mind around what this meant. My mind immediately went to what HR issue, because we had several. What other HR issue is this about? And I went and talked to one of my best friends who I work side by side with, and she was saying the same thing. Surely, it's got to be something to do with this other staff member that had recently left. And so we just could not figure out. But I knew immediately, that this was it. We got there and the deacon said, "Your employment is over, effective immediately. You can resign or be fired." I resigned and they promptly left the room, and I was left sitting with a stranger from the HR department talking about the next steps. I gave them my keys and my phone and my iPad, and I left. But I had nowhere to go. What do I do now? We moved here from Texas, and when a pastor gets terminated in that way, it's not just the closing of a chapter, it burns the rest of the story. I don't know if you are familiar with ministry, but when things happen the way they happened, it sends up a signal flare to any other church that this guy is trouble. Stay away from this guy. And so I'm left there. At the time, I'm 42 years old, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I start panicking. How am I going to provide for my family? What do we do? Do we move home? I honestly don't. I was dumbfounded. I was shell-shocked. I say all of that not to stir up anger in your heart, but to help you understand the anger and the rage that simmered in my heart for years, and the overwhelming desire for retribution. Pastors was just as human as anyone else, and so it was this desire to say, "God," it was the precatory Psalms, "God, bring judgment on the people that have so seriously wounded me and my family." There was this overwhelming desire for vindication, and I became like a pressure cooker, slowly building steam until it explodes and causes all kind of collateral damage. And I knew, this was the crazy part about preachers, because I have a master's degree in theology. I've spent 25 years studying the Bible, and I knew, forgive as I forgave you. And I knew to love my enemies, that Christians are to never retaliate. Just like Jesus, he had the power to destroy them, and yet he communicated love for those that were torturing him. But I couldn't do it. I failed the test. This was the most severe test of my theology, my real theology in my life, and I absolutely failed. And so there's this overwhelming guilt and condemnation of, I am not the Christian that I thought I was. I am definitely not the pastor that I thought I was. Because I thought I really believed what Jesus taught, but now I'm in the situation to actually demonstrate what I thought I believed, and I failed. Here's what happened. There was so much anger, where my fist would be like this, literally. And I'd find myself I'm sitting at home and I didn't intentionally start thinking about it, but my mind would automatically, it's like when I took my hand off the wheel, I'd veer into the ditch every time. And I'd sit there every day, and sometimes I don't know how long I was envisioning this, but I'm going over things in my mind over and over and over and over again. What could have been done differently? How did I fail them to the point that they thought this was their only option? And then I began to believe that maybe they're right. Maybe they saw something in me that I've never seen in myself. Maybe I am a narcissist. Maybe I am dangerous to God's people. Maybe I need to quit and just walk away, and that'd be better for the kingdom if I wasn't in it. So what I found was my fists are like this, and my energy and my strength was being depleted by the day, and it required so much effort for me to peel my fingers off of the hatred, to peel my fingers off of the anger. And so I got to the point where it required so much effort that I no longer tried. I just lived like this. And it was a pressure cooker. What happened decimated my identity. And it sent me on a spiral into the darkest season of my life. Some of you know that I started working at Cabela's last Christmas, and I've stayed on in a leadership position there since March of this year. A part of the reason that I sought work outside of the church was the fact that working from home was detrimental to my mental health for the first time in my life. I was taught that men go to work, that I leave the house and I go somewhere and I work hard and I come home tired. The fact that I was sitting at home and Amy would get up and go to work and the kids would go to school and I'm sitting there at home feeling like an absolute loser. In the church, you guys were so gracious enough to provide for our needs. I didn't feel worthy of it. Because I'm sitting there just for hours, with clenched fists, wondering if this is going to be the rest of my life. So I started working there because I desperately needed to get out and to be around other people. However, another secret part of me working at Cabela's was me exploring the possibility of another career. Because I thought God was done with me. When I looked at the Bible, it didn't come alive like it used to. I looked in the mirror and I had this deadness in my eyes. And I did not want to do this anymore because you deserve better. God deserves better. I dragged myself to church and I preached God's word, but it wasn't coming from here for a long time. I fulfilled an obligation. You paid me to preach, therefore I'm going to preach. It didn't come from here for a long time. And I hope some of you that have been on this journey with us, I hope you've maybe even detected a difference in the last month. Right? Wait a minute. There's something there now that wasn't there before. There's a light in the eyes. There's a spark. That the words might be the same, but they carry a different flavor. I was still a Christian, but no longer wanted to be in ministry. And I did not feel right about taking money from God's people when I knew in my heart that you deserved better. Things got progressively worse from there, and it culminated in May of this year when Amy sent me a letter saying that something had to change. This is all happening behind the scenes while I'm showing up and shaking hands. Again, preachers are master pretenders. I become who you need me to be. That's part of my calling. I'm not here to burden you. The last thing a pastor wants to do is burden the people he's called to serve. So that's a predicament. So what happens when the pastor falls apart? She wrote a letter because I was so emotionally volatile that she was afraid I might blow up if we had this conversation in person. And I hate to admit that she was right. She was. And it took incredible strength for her to confront me for her sake and for the sake of our children. But this is who I had become. A person that I hated. I hated myself. This negative, angry, bitter, cynical, because I remembered what joy felt like. I remembered the feeling of the fullness of the Spirit. It's almost like standing in the full sunlight of spring and then immediately stepping into the bitterness of winter. And as you're freezing, your mind is thinking of where you were. And you think, maybe I'll never get there again. After that, I renewed my commitment to get better, but I didn't see a way out. And so my plan was to simply pretend for the sake of my family, but I was so empty that I couldn't even pretend to be happy. I started to journal in May of this past year, and here are a few of the excerpts. On May the 16th, things have not been good. I've been in survival mode. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember ever not being like I am now, depressed and angry and exhausted. May the 18th, there is a chance, small though it may be, that I will eventually come out the other side better than I've ever been. But that seems so far away from where I am today. Today, I cling to the memory of joy and hope that someday it might be resurrected. May the 22nd. The devotional for today was all about rejoicing and suffering, and I think that's a bunch of bull crap. The pain, the loss, the trauma, the regret, losing my cousin, losing my dad, losing my calling, losing my joy, losing my family, losing. May the 24th. Things suck at home. I'm angry all the time, and this has created a toxic atmosphere. I think it's better for me not to be there. It's good that I work so much because I'm away from home, and my family is better off when I'm not around. These are my honest thoughts, unfiltered. The only other time in my life that I had been this low was in August of 1994 with the tragedy that precipitated my salvation. This is my testimony, my story, and I've shared it hundreds of times over the past 29 years. Here's the thing, though, with my original testimony. I crashed head first with rock bottom, and I was suffocating in shame and guilt, falling backwards in the darkness, but I was only there for a matter of days. Days. And then Jesus found me. He found me. He reached shoulder deep into the ditch, into the darkness, and he found me. He rescued me. And then what happened was an eruption of hope in my heart that I cannot explain. There was an explosion of joy in my soul that I can't find words to describe. It literally changed my life. It was a Damascus Road encounter with the living Christ. The light came on and it made all the difference. However, the darkness that I'm emerging from now lasted years, and in some ways, the duration of the darkness has made this the hardest season of my life. St. John of the Cross wrote a book called The Dark Night of the Soul in the 16th century, but most of the time, it's much more than a dark night. It's a dark season that can last for months, years, decades. For me, the darkness lasted 3 years, 5 months. That's 1,246 days. Never, not knowing if it would ever end. But then, and this is where it shifts, this is where the hope comes from. But then something started stirring in June. Not that long ago. We're in September, I'm talking about June. And it caught me off guard because I wasn't anticipating it. I was not expecting it. I had given up on anything better than what I had in that moment, in this season. 1,246 days of darkness, of winter. But the dry bones in the valley of death started rattling. There was a blip, just a tiny blip on the EKG screen. There was a spark of hope in the darkest of night. The spark that reignited something deep within the ash, the smoldering coal that still had something in it. You couldn't see it on the surface, but there was a heat, an embryonic fire buried at the heart of the coal that was buried under the mountain of ash. The wind of the Spirit blew over the ash and reignited the flame. It wasn't an explosion that immediately blew away all of the ash and debris. It wasn't fire falling down from heaven. It wasn't spectacular, but it was incredibly significant. The moment when you feel that you haven't, the moment when you feel something that you haven't felt in a long time, and you dare to hope. And even now, I'm terrified that this is temporary. And I know I'm not supposed to live in fear. I know that better than most. But I can't tell you, like, when I have a bad day now, I'm just, God, please, don't let me slide back into the pit, because I'm just a few steps out of it. My joy was gone. My hope was gone. My vision was gone. Dreaming was dead. But then, this is where we'll conclude on an exclamation point of hope. Because some of you have been in that dark season for a long time. And now I have profound empathy, where I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to share a verse with you. I'm not here to insult your faith and your pain by offering some trivial Christian slogan. But I will sit with you. And that's it. I'll sit with you. I won't preach to you. I won't send you links to sermons. I'm telling you, I know all of that is well-intentioned. I know it is. But for me, it backfired and only served to remind me of what a failure I am. Other preachers looking at me, and they look like they have it all together, and I'm thinking, I should be more like that guy. I wasn't even in a place as a preacher, as a pastor, to receive that. But the tiny blip on the screen, can you imagine standing beside the body of a loved one, and you think all hope is lost? They're dead and gone. But then, in the silence, in the moment there where you're grieving, but then you hear something, a tiny little blip on the screen. And can you imagine in that moment the explosion of hope? The eruption of hope. Maybe it's not over. What I thought was dead maybe can live again. The barely visible glow from the coal under the ash, the slight breeze that carries with it the aroma of heaven. It took some time, but the spark became a flame that has become a fire, and it became a blaze last month. It took time for me to crawl out of the pit, for God to drag me out of the pit. It's interesting that my first testimony happened in August, and now my second testimony happened around the same time. God bending down from his throne in heaven and gently breathing on the ash, coaxing the coal back to life one small breath at a time. And now by God's grace, and this is the exclamation point, by God's grace, I'm here to tell you that God didn't just bring me back to where I was before. No, he has brought me to a place where I am better than I have ever been. That's incredible. When you go, like when I moved here from Texas, when you go from like a +7 on a scale of 1 to 10, and then gradually that erodes, and then you crash at the end to like a -5, and then you get back to a +2, and you're just saying, yeah, +2, man, I'm winning because I'm not negative. And you begin to embrace the +2 as the new normal moving forward. But then what God shows me is that he blows the roof off of our preconceived notions, that it's not a scale of 1 to 10, it's a scale of 1 to heaven. And so now, I thought +7 was awesome. Now I'm sitting at a 20. And I know that this is a skyscraper, that there are more levels to experience. Now that my vision for the future has been resurrected and my calling stronger than ever, in the coming months I will be stepping away from Cabela's in order to focus all of my energy on making my God dreams a reality. God is in the resurrection business. And this is where I want to drive it home for all of us today. God is in the resurrection business at the very heart of Christianity, the very core. When you peel back all the layers of 2,000 years of church history, when you peel back all of the theology and all of the stuff that we've stacked upon it, and you get down to the very center of Christianity, you know what's there? A resurrection. God brings dead things back to life. What seems impossible to the human mind is possible with God. What do you do when you've exhausted every human option? I went to the counselors, which I recommend, by the way, and we'll talk about this in the practical session, about talking to your doctor and exploring the medical options that are available, pharmaceutical options that are available. You know, you go to church, you pray, you talk to counselors, you exercise, all of that, and yet I was still living with clenched fists. What do you do when every effort to fix what's broken has failed? And it's not that you're holding steady, you're not even holding even, you're losing ground. And so I'm trying so hard, and it's 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And that is such a demoralizing pattern. What do you do when the dream is dead and gone, and you're standing by its grave that's filled with what you thought was going to be your future? At this point, the only option is resurrection. So I tell you, not just as your pastor, but as a fellow pilgrim that's emerging from the valley of the shadow of death, from a place where I had lost all hope, and I'm not exaggerating for effect. I was looking into other careers. And part of the depression was that I wasn't qualified to do anything else. And so I'd apply for jobs, and they see my resume, like, who is this guy? Seminary, 25 years of working in a church, and to the secular organizations, that means nothing. And so I felt further rejection. It's like, nobody wants me. I'm useless. What do you do when you're in that point? Don't quit. Don't give up. Just keep breathing. Just keep going. Just keep living. Because you never know when the light will arrive. Weeping may last throughout the night, but joy comes with the dawn. And for all of us, regardless of where we're at on this narrow path, the light is on the way. The light is on its way. Don't give up before it arrives. Psalm chapter 40 says, I waited a long time for the Lord. He finally knelt down to hear me. He listened to my weak and whispered cries. He reached down and drew me out of the deep, dark hole where I was stranded, mired in the muck and clay. With a gentle hand, he pulled me out and set me down in a secure and safe place. He held me until I was steady enough to continue the journey. As if that were not enough, because of him, my mind is clearing up. Now I have a new song to sing, a song of praise to the one who rescued me. Because of what God has done, many people will see and come to trust in the Lord. I'd like to conclude with a medley of verses from the prophet Isaiah. Chapter 35. Even in the wilderness and the wasteland, even the wilderness and the wasteland will be glad in the coming days. The wasteland will rejoice and explode with the vibrant colors of new life. Yes, there will be an abundance of flowers and singing and joy. The desert will become an oasis of beauty. The dead ground will become a pool. Fresh water will satisfy the thirsty land. Green things will flourish where predators once prowled. Joy and gladness will finally defeat the sorrow and the despair. Now the exclamation point from chapter 61. He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to repair broken hearts and to declare to those who live in dungeons, be free from your imprisonment. He has sent me to announce the year of Jubilee, the season of God's favor. As for those who grieve over what was lost, God has sent me to give them a beautiful crown in exchange for ashes, to anoint them with joy and praise instead of depression and despair. And they will rebuild this place from its ancient ruins. Something new and better will arise from the ashes of defeat. I am filled with joy, and my soul vibrates with exuberant hope because of the faithfulness of my God, for he has taken off my robe of defeat, and he has wrapped me in the robe of his righteousness. Would you stand? Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would supernaturally infuse hope into every single heart. Regardless of how dark and cold the night, it never lasts forever. So give us the strength to hold on until the light arrives. In Jesus' name, amen.